They say that talking to yourself is a sign of mental illness, but I think that's only if you answer back, right? Right. Whatever. Yeah, don't really care. This is Talking to Myself, a podcast where I use anecdotes from my life to try to make myself a better artist, and possibly a better person. Hopefully other people can get some use out of this as well, but I'm really just trying to avoid paying for therapy. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about apathy, which is, it is what you think it is, and it's also just my term for something that is specific to artists and to creatives of all types. You can call it block or resistance if you're into The War of Art. It's a book. But generally, what I'm speaking of when I say apathy is the pretty standard definition, not caring about something. And the reason I'm bringing it up in this context is because I'm having a lot of trouble with it myself recently. You can say that I'm blocked or that I'm lazy, which is probably closer to the truth. But mostly what I'm feeling is that I don't feel motivated to do anything, artistically speaking. I've got several big projects on the table that I really need to get working on. I'm getting further and further behind, and it's hard to care. Now, I know apathy is also, when it becomes chronic, is sometimes considered a symptom of depression, and that's possible. I have dealt with that in the past. I'm not sure if that's what this is or not right now. Hopefully, this self-talk thing will help me, which is the point of this whole podcast. Help me get over what I'm going through at the moment and help me develop into motivation that I can use to work on these projects I desperately need to work on. Luckily for me, one of these projects is this podcast, so working on this issue through the podcast is also accomplishing something that I'm putting off because of this issue. So that's the solution, guys. Just start a podcast you have to do every week, and then all your problems will be solved. Kidding, just kidding. So like most instances, this time I'm going to relate it back to my past. Less of a specific instance this time in my past, but just generally things that have happened that I've dealt with. And I'll tie it back into the art at the end, because that's kind of the point of all this. Like a lot of people my age, I've been through a lot of relationships with other people. Familial relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, all kinds of things like that. And like a lot of people, there have been disappointments and letdowns, breakups, broken hearts, all kinds of stuff like that. And what I've found has happened to me, or I've forced myself into, or what I've done, is I've developed this self-defense mechanism of apathy, not really caring about certain things actively as a way to prevent risk or being hurt by them. I'm sure everyone's done this before. The trick to this that I've discovered is to not just do it willy-nilly, blanket kind of thing. You can't let yourself not care about anything, because in that case, you probably will end up needing some help from professionals to get back on track. Because if life itself has no meaning to you, then, why bother with anything? The trick to use it to your advantage is to not care about things that would prevent you from doing something if you cared about them too much. Caring about what other people think, what people are going to say, how they're going to react to something you do or don't do, that can easily be put in the apathy pile, I think safely. But it's a double-edged sword, apathy. Or I guess since it makes you ineffective, it's more like a Nerf sword or a pool noodle. The point here is, it can make it so that being apathetic about things becomes your natural state, and that protection from harm is what motivates you in everything. So it's very hard to try something, to do something, to accomplish anything, when you have to first overcome your natural apathy. So you have to train yourself to look at the situation or look at a goal or something and realize its worth to you or to whatever audience you're trying to serve, and do like a cost benefits analysis. There's always risk involved, but there's no reward without risk. And where apathy prevents you from having to deal with the risk, it also prevents you from having to deal with reward. So if you do that analysis, you look at what you're trying to accomplish and you say, if I accomplish this, what's the worst that could happen? And if the worst is truly horribly negative, then maybe you're right to be apathetic about it and not try it. But generally speaking, for creative endeavors, what you're going to find is that the cost, the possible maximum cost, is going to be acceptable. Maybe someone won't like it, or maybe it probably won't ruin your career if you're worried about things like this. Unless you're making major moves and you're well above my level, then it won't matter. But that's the way I look at it. Is like if I start I use it retroactively too, apathy. If I start feeling that this project is getting out of hand and I'm not sure that it's going to end up where I want it to be, I'm like, well, does it really matter? No? Then keep going. Finish it. Which is kind of weird because that's sort of the opposite of the way apathy usually works. Apathy after you've begun can probably be more useful than before you start. But again, this is consciously chosen apathy. This is not what most people have to deal with. For me, once you do that cost-benefit analysis and you realize that there is worth in what you're trying to do, forcing yourself past the resistance or the apathy or block or whatever it is to start on something is the goal. That's the point. And then after, like we just said, you can let the apathy act as a cushion around you as you work on this stuff, not worrying about stress or anxiety over the results of your work, because it doesn't really matter. But you have to be able to turn that off again when you get to the end and it comes time to promote the work or to put it out there, because you have to care about it to make other people care about it. That's one of the biggest problems with using apathy as a crutch or a self-defense mechanism. It's the turning it off. It's insidious. It sort of becomes part of how you look at everything, and that makes it very difficult to get rid of. So especially for art projects or creative endeavors, what I'm going to try to do, and I'm sort of just coming up with this on the seat of my pants here, flying. Is that the term? Flying by the seat of my pants? How do you even do that? What if you're standing up when you fly? Flying by the soles of my feet doesn't sound very intriguing. It's very odd. Flying by the seat of the aircraft I'm in? That's probably more accurate. It's still stupid sounding. I digress. We'll do another podcast on digression and procrastination later. The point I'm trying to come up with here for myself is, how do I manipulate my apathy so that it protects me, so that I can get motivated enough to start something and continue it and finish it, but then it doesn't prevent me from sharing it or from putting all into it. That's the other thing too. Apathy will water down your efforts to the point where you're barely making any effort, and it's impossible to do your best in that case. It's impossible to show people what you really are capable of when you just can't bring yourself to care about what you're working on enough to do that. And I know everyone says you got to give it 100%. You got to really want the best. You got to do your hardest all the time. It's like but you can't do that. By definition, your best effort is limited. Your best effort is the peak of effort that you can achieve, not a standard of effort that you can achieve. Were it possible to do your best all the time, it wouldn't be called your best. It'd just be called your standard effort. And your best would be beyond that. So, keep that in mind too. And that's probably apathy creeping in again. The point I'm trying to tell myself here is, again, recognize that you're being apathetic about stuff, and the not caring about stuff is not a death knell to your project. It doesn't mean that you're not going to finish it or work on it. You have to learn to use that apathy to keep you protected so that you feel comfortable and safe enough to proceed on the work. But you have to be willing to push the apathy aside and put your full effort into something if you expect to do any good at it. And since these 3 major projects I have for this year are significant and could mean a lot to me as an artist, as a professional, as creative, I have to be willing to put as much effort in them as I possibly can. Maybe doing all 3 of them at once is a bad idea, so I'll be alternating, most likely. But I can't let my innate apathy keep me from working on them at all. So keep apathy in your back pocket to use as a cushion. Protect yourself if you feel like you're falling, but don't let it keep you from climbing the mountain in the first place. Or whatever, I really don't care. Thanks everyone for listening. You guys are great. I really appreciate you all checking out the podcast. Special thanks to my supporters on Patreon. You guys are the most wonderful, shiny people I know. And without you, there'd be no podcast. I hope everyone enjoyed this week and can get something out of it. If you can make any sense of this tangled mess. I appreciate you all. Take care, and I'll speak to you again soon.